We're talking about today, Miriam.
We're broadcasting. We are live. We're going to start a few minutes, a minute early so people can have a chance to join. Get the page here. You do. Just going to share it on two more platforms and we'll be ready to go. Oh, good evening, Kayla Gittel. Da-da-do. Oh, you know. Da-da-da-da-da. 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 You don't want some coffee at 7 p.m.? I'm joking. We're 10 seconds away from starting. Good evening, Jane. I don't know. Good Yontav L'chaim. Okay. We have quite a group with us today on Facebook and on Zoom. Playing picture in picture. Why is it playing picture in picture? Hold on. Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone can see me because my computer is not showing me that. Let me see if I can fix that. Someone write in the chat on Zoom and let me know if you can see me because I don't see myself, which is very odd. But it would help to know that someone can see me. If any of you on the Zoom can let me know in the chat if you see me. Yes, you can see in here. Okay, wonderful. I can't see myself, which is kind of odd. I'm not sure why. Let's try this. Maybe this will help. I don't think so. Madna. You know what madna means? It's odd. But if you can see me, that's wonderful. And we'll call it a day. Hide self-view. Don't know. No. Show self-view.
You just were Jewish head. Yiddish. Yeah.
Okay, there's more people joining, so I guess it's a good sign. Okay. I'll get as a sign from heaven. Don't know why you can't see me, but I'm glad everyone is here. It is Parshas Beshalach, the portion of Beshalach. It is also Yud Shvat, even though already now the sun is set, it's nightfall, so it's already the 11th of Shvat, which is the first day that the Rebbe already formally acted as a Rebbe. But obviously these 2 days, the 10th and 11th of Shvat, in the year 1950 and 51, 5710 and 5711, are very, very remarkable days on the Chabad calendar, on the calendar of the Jewish world. It was in 1950 on January 28th on Yud Shvat Shabbos morning that the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak Schneerson, passed away. My great-grandfather, Rabbi Yochanan Gordon, my Bubby's father, had the honor of doing the Tahara on the head they had a raffle of which chassid is going to do the tahara, the preparation for burial, on the head of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he was the one that had the merit of doing it. And then the Rebbe, it took a full year until the Rebbe, I mean, for most chassidim, the first year the Rebbe was already the Rebbe, but formally the following year the Rebbe said the famous discourse, Basi Lagani Achaisi Kala, and began accepted formally the mantle of leadership that the chassidim put upon him, and transitioned into our generation of transforming the Jewish world and growing everything that his father-in-law started. So it is a very, very big day, and we're actually going to talk about it in the context of tonight's class, but we're going to start in the Parsha, because you always got to start in the Parsha. The Alter Rebbe, 1951, when he formally accepted, so 75 years ago today. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, the author of the Tanya, said famously, "You have to live with the times." And his brother was trying to figure out, what does it mean to live with the times? And what he discovered was that it meant to live with the Parsha of the week. In other words, the Parsha is not something you just read because, it happens to be the Parsha we're going to read in Shul and Shabbos, so let's study it. Or, hey, we got to go through the whole Torah once a year, so this week happens to be this Parsha. When we study a Parsha, and it happens to be the week of something going on, like, for example, we as Jews, we cannot sit by and not recognize that the week that we talk about Joseph's bones coming out of Egypt and going to Israel was the week in which Ran Gvili, the last remaining deceased Jew being held hostage in Gaza, came home to his family and was buried in Israel today. You can't. We can ignore we'd say it's just coincidence, but there is no such thing. Literally, on the day that we were reading about the body of Joseph joining the Jewish people, is when we got the announcement that he's going to be buried and that they found his body. This is nothing's coincidence. I say that because the fact that Yud Shvat, this auspicious day on the Chabad calendar, is being celebrated and being commemorated. Because it's interesting, Yud Shvat is both a celebration and a commemoration. We're commemorating the passing of the previous Rebbe. We're celebrating the appointment or the anointment or the transition from the previous Rebbe to the Rebbe, which for our generation is a great celebration. So it's not a mistake. It just happens to be that Yud Shvat is in the portion of B'Shach, but they're very much connected, and we'll see that specifically in what I'm about to talk about. So let's open our Chumash to page 408, right in the first page of the Parsha. Last week we had the last of the 10 plagues. We had the Paschal Lamb offering. The Jews are going to leave Egypt. It says the Jews left Egypt. They were armed. That was a sign of freedom. They were armed. And right in the beginning, verse 19. So the portion starts in verse 17. So in the third verse of the Parsha, it says these words: Moshe took Joseph's bones with him because he had made his brothers swear that they would make their children swear, saying, God will surely remember you, and shall bring up my bones from here with you. So Moshe Rabbeinu, think of this, Moses, the leader of the Jewish people, who's charged with the mission of taking the entire Jewish people and exporting them out of Egypt into the desert, eventually to Sinai and to Israel. What is he busy with at the Exodus? He's busy taking Joseph's bones, Joseph's body. Joseph had passed away 130 years before the Exodus. And if you look back in Genesis, at the end of Genesis, it's very clear, and I think it's important to see it in the verse, right at the end of Genesis, page 322, or actually in English, page 323, it says these words. Joseph said to his brothers, I'm going to die. I am soon going to die. God will surely remember you and take you out of this land, to the land that he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph made his children swear, saying, God will surely remember you. You should then take my bones out of here. Joseph died at the age of 110, and he's buried in a coffin in Egypt. So Joseph, at the end of Genesis, beseeches and administers an oath to his children that they should administer to their children, so that I'm telling you, God will take us out of here. And when he does, no matter when that is, I want you to take my body and bring it to the land of Israel. Now remember, Yosef was the leader who saved the Jewish people from and the rest of the world from hunger. He was a leader that had kindness, empathy, and generosity. The Egyptians held him in great regard. So what do you think they did with his body after he died? They put him into a steel casket and they let it sink into the Nile River. Why? First of all, the Nile was their idol. That was the source of their food and their sustenance. So they wanted to have his holy body in their source of sustenance. And they didn't want the Jews to find this casket because they knew the Jews would eventually leave. They also knew that God said they wouldn't leave without Joseph. So they figured if they hide Joseph's casket, the Jews will never leave. He knew this. Joseph understood that. He understood that they wanted him to stay there, which is why he didn't make a fight that they should take him right away, because then he would lose the fight. And then it would be worse for the Jews. So 130 years later, it's time to leave Egypt. Joseph's body. The problem is, how do I find his body? Either he was sunk in a stainless box, a steel box all the way at the bottom of the Nile. There is another opinion in Avos Reb Nosson, in the Medrash of Reb Nosson, that says they actually put him in a crypt, like where they put the mummies over there with the Egyptians. That's even a more, if I can say it myself, a little more of a creepy Medrash, that they went in front of the crypt, and then suddenly the bones started rattling, and Joseph made his way out of it. But accepting the regular interpretation of the Medrash, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to find the spot where he was buried. There was only one person alive that was alive 130 years earlier and old enough to remember what they did with Joseph's body. Who was that? Serach, the daughter of Usher. Usher, right, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, Asher, married a woman who had a daughter named Serach. So Serach was Asher's stepdaughter. If you remember, when the news came from Joseph, when his brothers came to Israel to let Jacob know that Joseph was still alive, they were scared that Jacob would get a heart attack from the news that his son is still alive 22 years later. So they had Serach. She was a musician. She played the harp, and they had her play music for Jacob as the news was coming in, hoping that the music would calm him and he wouldn't get freaked out and get a heart attack from the news. So she lived. She knew her grandfather Jacob, she knew her uncle Joseph, and she lived a very long life. Because she gave life to Jacob, she was blessed with arichas yamim, with longevity. She's alive, so Moses goes to her and says, do you know where they buried Joseph? She says, yes. They stood near that part of the Nile, and Joseph stood there and said, Yosef, Yosef, Joseph, Joseph, the time regarding which God promised that I will redeem you has arrived, and it's time to go to the land of Israel. And that he threw a note into the water, and the casket rose to the top, and they were able to take Joseph's casket and carry it with them in the desert. And where was it in the desert? It was being schlepped along next to the Ark of the Covenant. Eventually, it was going to be the giving of the Torah. There's going to be there's going to be the tablets. They're going to be in an ark. That ark that was carried in the desert went along next to the coffin of Joseph, because Joseph was the embodiment of everything that it says in the Torah. And it was only when they got to the land of Israel. Now, who took the Jews into Israel? In the book of Joshua. For 40 years, Joseph's body schlepped around the desert with the Jews. And we're going to talk about that. Why? But eventually, when Joshua leads the Jews into Israel, the verse says, it's a verse in Joshua, and the bones of Joseph, which they had brought from Egypt, they buried in Shechem, in Nablus, in the portion of land that Jacob had bought from Hamor, the son of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. Back in the book of Genesis. Remember when Jacob got to Israel, and the story of Dinah and Shechem, and right before they got there, Jacob paid for it in cash. And it's interesting, Rashi says, where was Joseph, when Joseph was taken by his brothers and sold into slavery, he was which area? In Shechem. That's the location. So he returned full circle to the place where they had stolen from, sold him into slavery, and that's where he was buried. That is the story of Joseph. That is just the basic midrashic story of Joseph's body and how it got to Israel. The question is why? And what I mean by that is, now we understand that Joseph administered an oath, but when you looked at the verse that we read in verse 19, it said, if you want to know the exact language, it said, just pull it up here, because it is important. It says like this. He says, the children, 18. God led the people on a roundabout route through the desert to the Sea of Reeds. The children of Israel were armed when they went out of Egypt, and then Moshe took the bones with him. In other words, the correlation here seems to be that the fact that the Jews were schlepping through the desert, there's a connection between the schlepping through the desert and the fact that Joseph's bones, Joseph's body, Joseph's coffin was with them. So in two different talks, what I share with you tonight, going forward from right at this moment, is from volume 26 of the Rebbe's edited talks, but also from a Farbrengen that the Rebbe shared in 1986, so not so long ago. And he said this is the deeper reason for what we're experiencing, and it's a very fascinating thing, and it's directly connected to Yud Shvat. I don't believe the Rebbe spoke about it in connection with Yud Shvat, but when I was learning it today, I was like, now that is Yud Shvat in all its glory, and I'll explain. The Jews were going into the desert. What is the desert? The Torah says the desert is a place of snakes, vipers, scorpions, and thirst with no water. Naturally, a desert has no water. You could bring water with you, but the desert is a place of thirst with no water. What does that mean spiritually? It represents a place that has multiple spiritual dangers. You have a place that potentially can create spiritual thirst with no opportunities for quenching the thirst. That people that end up in situations where they're desperate for their soul to be nourished, and there's not, they put themselves in an environment like a spiritual desert where there's no one to nourish them. You have the snake ailments, which is hot venom. You have scorpions, which is cold venom. There's the type of negativity that heats you up for the wrong things. There's the type of venom that cools you off from the things that you should be passionate about. So the desert and what the desert entails is very much spiritual danger. And in situations like that, a person may not have the ability to retain their strength, to stand up to those obstacles and spiritual challenges. And sometimes spiritually, as we actually saw in the desert, how many times the Jewish people failed in their faith in God, and their belief in Moses, and their issues with the food, with the manna, with the water, with the every minute, with the rock. They're never ending parshas, meaning it was a manifestation in the physical world of what a desert means spiritually, which is you're in a situation that is a spiritual desert where you don't have the environment, the nourishment, the sustainability that a Jew needs to retain their spiritual well-being and their relationship with God. How do you beat that dilemma? What do you do to ensure that the Jewish people should not fall totally in that process? They shouldn't drop spiritually dead in the process. They should have some level of stability and strength to stand up to and deal with the spiritual obstacles, the snakes, the scorpions, the thirst, the yearning for holiness, but not having the strength to attain it. So for that, Moshe insisted and Joseph insisted that his body be taken into the desert. Not just the body in general, but specifically the words that are used as atzmos Yosef, the bones. So it's an odd word to use. Atzmos Yosef. You couldn't be more respectful to Joseph and say his coffin or his body, his guf. Why are you saying atzmos, the bones? The Megala Amukos, which is actually Dimitri's a descendant of the Megala Amukos. He was a great rabbi in Krakow, Poland. I believe it was 16th century or 17th century. But the Megala Amukos is a mystic who happens to be our Dimitri's a descendant of his through his mother's side. His name was Rabbi Spiro, I believe. Megala Amukos says that the word in Hebrew for bones, etzem, also is the same word for essence. The etzem of something is the essence of something, and etzem can also mean a bone. Why in Hebrew these two things mean the same thing? It's very common in Hebrew to have two meanings to the same word. And so the Torah is saying we didn't just take Joseph with us, his body or his coffin or his casket. We took Atzmos Yosef. Now you look at it, they say it's derogatory, the bones. No. It's the etzem. We took the essence of Joseph with us because that will be our protection in the desert. What's the essence of Joseph? That's physical. What's the essence of Yosef? When Rachel, Joseph's mother, when she gave birth to her first son, which was Joseph, she said, Yosef Hashem li ben acher. Hashem should give me another son. Yosef means to add. Meaning, when she had her first child, she was already davening, praying to Hashem that he should give her another child. And she named the first child for the blessing that she wanted to have another child. In other words, Joseph's essence, as the Tzemach Tzedek says, is Joseph takes the acher, takes the other, and turns it into a ben, turns him into a son. You have entities and people in this world that are living lives where they are an acher, they are an other. They are far from godliness, they are far from holiness, they are living in an other realm, not a godly realm. Yosef comes, Yosef Hashem li ben acher. His entire name, his definition, his essence is about taking that other child who's so far distant from God that it's considered other and making him a ben, making him into a son of God, making him feel and understand and appreciate and feel connected to as a child of Hashem. That's Yosef's entire life. Yosef was the premier of Egypt. But in his life trajectory, in Potiphar's house, he retained his identity as a Jew proudly, even though he was in a very unhealthy environment. When he goes to jail, to the dungeon, he's not only retaining his Jewish identity, but he's helping others with their dreams and interpreting the dreams and asking them why they're not feeling, like, why do you look so sad? He was always caring about the other, making sure the other should feel at home. Never hiding his identity. When he tells the baker and the butler that when they get out, they should tell Pharaoh that he says, tell them there's an Ivri, there's a Jewish kid here. He doesn't say there's a nice Egyptian boy who was put in jail for a lie, who was accused of something he never did. He says, I'm a Jew. Tell them Ivri, there's a Jewish kid, a Jewish lad. Then he becomes the premier and he's sustaining the whole world. And in that process, he never forgets who he is. He raises his two sons, Menashe and Ephraim, even though they never met Jacob and they never met Joseph's brothers. And the only Jew they ever met, Menashe and Ephraim, was their father Joseph and their mother Asnas. That's it. They knew nothing about, they weren't part of a Jewish community. They could have easily felt lonely as a Jew, especially in their own palace, where it's an Egyptian palace. It's not a Pharaoh and his entourage. I mean, the whole operation was very much an Egyptian one. They had their father gave them his essence, and his essence was Yosef Hashem li ben acher. My entire existence is not only to live a life as a Jew, but to find those who are distant from God, who feel like an acher, like an other, who feel lonely and sad, who feel disenfranchised, who feel left out, and make them feel wanted, make them feel welcome, make them feel connected. It was in Yosef's DNA. That's who he was, the etzem, not just the bone, the essence. Now the Jews are going into a desert. And they're going to a desert that's full of spiritual challenges, just like Joseph understood well. He lived all those spiritual challenges. The wife of Potiphar, his brothers put him in a pit. He lost his mother. He's in a jail. I mean, everything about his life was how you can retain your identity and live healthfully, even when you feel alone and feel disenfranchised. And he understood the challenge, the spiritual dilemma of being in a desert alone. And he knew that it could make them become an other. It could push them away in the desert. The Jews are going to go into the desert, right? They finally left Egypt. They're going to be in a desert where there's all these physical challenges, but that also is a manifestation of the spiritual challenges, and it can make them feel disconnected from God. So what do? They take Yosef with them. And who takes Yosef with them? Moshe himself. He doesn't say, hey, buddy, could you help me get Joseph's body out? You think Moshe couldn't just snap a finger and have 500 people ready to help? Out of 2 point whatever million Jews, there was enough people that liked Moshe that would have helped him. Maybe not Dasan and Aviram, but there was plenty that would. Why did he have to do it himself? Because Moshe was giving them and us the message that in order to survive in the desert, in order to survive in a situation where there are spiritual obstacles, and to ensure that people don't become others and they retain their identity as a ben, as a child of God, as a connected Jew, you need to have the Yosef mentality. Take Yosef with you, because Yosef lived that life, carried that idea, and was going to be there for them in the desert to stick with the program even when things get rough. To be a Jew is not just to stick with the program when everything's easy and you're in in Maui, in the spiritual Maui. It's when you're in spiritual Sudan. Right? Did you ever meet anyone at the airport that was wearing some kind of flattery Hawaiian shirt, said, I'm going off to vacation in Khartoum? You never met that in your life. You never met someone saying, I'm going on vacation to Khartoum or to Darfur. You never heard that, ever. You ever heard someone in the airport say, I'm going on vacation to Flint, Michigan? I travel in a lot of airports. I've heard a lot of locations. You never heard someone say, ooh, I'm waiting, spring break, I'm going to Flint. Why? Because there are places that are physically, geographically, naturally phenomenal. There are places that are nishtas, where you have to dig a lot deeper to find the niceness. Spiritually, it's no different. There are environments that are conducive for spiritual well-being. If someone said, I'm going to certain districts in Amsterdam because I'm looking for spirituality, you would know something's wrong. If someone said, I'm going to 8th Avenue in Manhattan to look for spirituality, you know there's something wrong. If someone said, I'm going to the Western Wall, or I'm going to a yeshiva, or I'm going to a shtivel in Borough Park for spirituality, it makes sense. There are places that are a good environment for that. There are places that are rough for that. And our job is to create a sustainability within ourselves with the power of Yosef, to learn from him, to embody him, to live his legacy, to study his identity and what he did to retain his identity. That even when we don't want to be, even when we end up in the Khartoum of spirituality, even if you end up in the red light district in Amsterdam, I think that's what it's called, or on 8th Avenue in Manhattan, that you have what it takes to be strong, to be a Yid. Now, we talked about Yud Shvat. First of all, the previous Rebbe's name was Yosef Yitzchak. The Rebbe always talked about the connection between Yosef, the story from Joseph in Genesis, and the Frierdiker Rebbe. There's so much of their life that had similarities in their style and what they were looking to. The Frierdiker Rebbe spent his entire life trying to turn people that felt like others and make them feel like they're children of Hashem. And of course, the Rebbe continued that in all its glory. Can you imagine the power that every one of us has to live that idea, to find the others, those who feel disconnected in general, in the world in general, those who feel disconnected from society, from sanity, from family, but then in the Jewish world in particular, those who feel disconnected from their Jewish family. And ensure, like the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted, like the Rebbe insisted, the Rebbe gave us the mission to go and ensure that there should never be a lonely Jew in this world. There should never be a lonely human being in this world that feels that Hashem is not watching over them, that doesn't recognize that Hashem's divine providence is guiding them and that they're part of Mamleches Kohanim v'Goy Kodesh, a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. So it's not a mistake that we're learning Bishalach about Yosef's bones, Yosef's body, Yosef's essence, and the guidance and protection he gives the Jew in the desert, because that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, whose day we celebrate and commemorate on Yud Shvat, were all about. America doesn't scare us. Secularism doesn't scare us. Communism, capitalism, conservatism, liberalism, libertarianism, fascism, all the isms don't scare us. We have a Torah. And no matter what's going on in the world, we have what it takes to stand strong, not just for ourselves, but also bring others on board and let them taste from the tree of life that Judaism offers, by ensuring that they don't feel alienated and disconnected from who they are and their heritage. And what's interesting, and we'll wrap it up with this, is that, remember I said in the beginning of the class that how did Moses find Yosef's body? He brought Serach, Asher's daughter, who lived with all this long life, and she came and helped. So the Rebbe says that it's not a coincidence that the woman who helped Moshe find Yosef's body was Serach from the tribe of Asher. Why? Because Asher, the tribe of Asher, when they got the land of it, when the land of Israel was divided up, when they got Asher, God says, Asher Shmeina Lachmai. He had very in the land, the Toivel B'Shem and Raglai, that the tribe of Asher got the part of the land of Israel that had very, very great olives, produced olive oil. Your favorite thing, Baruch, you and your olive oil, Middle Eastern diet. So Asher had the olive oil. What does oil represent spiritually? Represents Pnimius HaTorah. It represents the esoteric, the mystical teachings of the Torah. It's the juice, it's the fattiness of Judaism. So when you want to learn this trait of finding the other and making sure that they feel like they're a child of God, that they feel connected, the only way to do it is with Sarah, the daughter of Asher, which means you have to do it with the oil. You have to do it with learning Chassidus. When we get the opportunity to study, and we do it here every Wednesday, and Shabbos, obviously, we talk about it, but when we study Chassidus, whether it's Tanya or other discourses in Chassidus, when we study the esoteric, the mystical, the Chassidic depth, the Kabbalistic depth of the Torah, it allows us, it gives us better energy, better ability to see the Jew who may feel like they are another, and bring them back into the fold by showing them that they are truly a son of Hashem or daughter of Hashem. So it's not a coincidence that Moshe utilized the services of Sarah, the daughter of Asher, because it's Asher, whose tribe was gifted with oil, because it's the oil of Torah, which is Chassidus, the previous Torah, the esoteric aspects of Torah that allow us to see another human being with that set of eyes. It's not a natural thing. We always like naturally to see the negative in others, but to see another person who may be lonely, spiritually lonely, physically lonely, materially lonely, familially lonely, and bring them back to their family, practically, but also spiritually to their Jewish family, to make them feel and know that Hashem is there and loves them and cares for them and their part, and they will never be disconnected from that relationship with Hashem. That is something that we get to do. And the more we study Chassidus ourselves, the better ability we have, the better tools we have. It's like the toolbox. You have what's in the toolbox? Chassidus. The more Chassidus you study, the deeper you go in your study of Torah and the esoteric aspects of it, the better ability you will have to help the Acher become a Ben, to help the other become a son, to do reenact Joseph's mentality, which is remain strong with who you are no matter what the surroundings are, and also bring others on board with the love and concern that was shared by Joseph, shared by Moshe, but in our generation, in the last 100 years, shared by the previous Rebbe, whose name was Yosef Yitzchak, and shared by our dear Rebbe of blessed memory, who guided us and inspired us with his leadership, not, right, as Robert said before class, the first thing the Rebbe said in the first Farbrengen was, I'm not going to do the job for you. I'll be here to support you, guide you, and help you, but the work is going to be done by you. Each of us in this generation has the ability and the guidance and the push to bring everyone back on board. Whether we do it or not is up to us, but that we have the ability and the guidance and the energy to do so is factual. And now we got to do what Moshe did, take Joseph and bring him with you for the journey. And through that, we not only get to survive the desert and the challenges, but we end up like Joseph did in the land of Israel, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, when we'll be reunited with all our matriarchs and patriarchs. Amen. And he's speedily in our days. I mean, he'll be resurrected. We don't have to worry about his bones. He'll come back in all its glory. And I look forward to that sooner than later.